It is a very snowy Thursday afternoon, the 10th day of January 2005. And you know the old joke about not sending out a night on a dog like dog on a night on a three dog or whatever that joke was? Well, Calvin sent me out.
And it's February.
February 10th. 2005, heading up the Northway was a delicious experience in four-wheel drive, waving as the truckers went by at 65, and I'm creeping along at 35. But we're here because we're on a mission, and that mission is to talk a little bit about North Country history. This is a map that was reportedly taken in 1972. Calvin was already trying to point out where we were. I forgot where he said it was. Right here? Yeah. That's a thumbnail. No, that's a pinky nail. And we've already discussed the fire station, when it was built, and whether it was built in those days or what happened. Actually, we're going to talk a lot about North Country history because it seems to be a focus of this program called Our Little Corner. And we're going to chat in a few moments with Donna Racine, Jim Giroux. It's Giroux, right, Jim? Is standing in the background. Who knows what contributions Jim might make to our program today. I guarantee I'll know more when I leave here than I did, and I probably don't even have anything to brush my car off with, but we'll deal with that. Oh, Jim will do it, she says. She's pointing over her shoulder. I think you'll find this an interesting program, as most of them are. Stay with us for Our Little Corner. We're at the Rouses Point Village offices along Lake Street, although it's hard to tell one scene from the next today outside because everything's covered with white. Donna Racine, how are you?
Fine, how are you, Gordy?
Don't be so darn nervous about this program. It's going to be a can of corn. I've never been upstairs in this building before. Calvin told me how to get here when I came through Rouses Point, but I've been here many times for different things. I think my first exposure to Rouses Point was probably around the 4th of July, 1961 or 62 for the parade and the
What took you so long?
shindig.
You missed a lot.
Well, actually, I didn't get here until then. I worked
There.
on the air base in the 50s, but didn't make it north to Rouses Point until I came here to work on the radio, and that would have been 1961. So that's when I started coming up here for those wonderful summertime festivities, and boy, they were great, weren't they? And they still are.
They still are. And they draw a lot of people, and Rouses Point can handle it so well. You know, it's with the lake, and it's my favorite spot in the whole world, so don't judge by me,
Where were
Gordon.
you born and brought up?
Here.
Right here in this village?
Right here.
And you were a laundry, Calvin says.
As far as I know, I was a laundry.
That's wonderful. There's a sign in the bottom of the cabinet which we've been diligently trying to get open. We're not sure if we can do that before we're finished, but were you always interested in history, Donna, or did that just come after a while? Or
In retrospect, Gordy, I think my grandfather was very interested in history. And he had a liquor store. And in the back of the liquor store there was an L. And in that L, one wall was solid books. And there was a comfortable reading chair and a lamp and an ottoman. And he'd sit in the chair and I'd sit in the ottoman. And of course he discussed the Bible with me and so on. But outline of history, H.G. Wells, Plutarch's Lives, so on.
Boy.
Or the phone would ring and Grandpa would say, send Donna down, Captain Turner's here. Or they didn't have a potbelly stove, but they met there. And I'd get a history lesson. And I look back on it now, and the big mistake was I never asked questions. I listened. But the questions I have now. The questions I have now.
And it's too late to ask most of
And of
those
course,
guys now,
He
right?
taught me to read in the liquor store, and I could read Johnny Walker Red Label and Black Label and Seagram 7, and the sisters were upset because I didn't care about Dick and Jane.
Isn't that amazing? So you grew up in a liquor store.
I grew up around there, and if
Around
I
that
hadn't,
area.
we lived on Elm Street, which was a world away in a way. But because I did go to the liquor store, I did get familiar with Lake Street and the people there. You didn't wander from your area as much then as they do now. You pretty well had a neighborhood and you stayed right there. And what made the whole village so cohesive was the school. We brought it all together when we all got to school.
Isn't it amazing? It's either a fire station or a school or a church, That's the focal point of a community, sometimes all three. Nowadays, a lot of that focus is gone, isn't it?
Well, they seem to have to, we didn't have cars. Our parents didn't have cars. And this was right after the Depression. And you just walked everywhere, and I don't know how we did it. I can't remember. On Friday nights, we would walk downtown to go to the Grand Union and get a week's groceries. And Mom and Dad would each carry 2 bags, and I don't remember carrying much of anything other than a Milky Way candy bar.
That's not a bad thing, you know.
Well, for 5 cents, you got a great, great big one, and that was every Friday.
Now you're lucky to get a bite for a nickel, right?
And on the way home, we'd stop at Uncle Albert's restaurant, which was the Black and White. It's gone now, it burned down. And if it were March, he'd say, "What a treat, my girl." It was green ice cream. I grew up before I learned it was pistachio, but he magically made this green ice cream. And we would walk all the way back up to Elm, and never a complaint. Everyone walked. It was a beautiful, no plows, no sidewalk plows. The street plows would go by and the banks would pile up, and we'd walk from Elm down to St. Pat's on Lower Maple, and we'd walk the top of the banks. Now today, they'd say a child is going to fall off, get killed, whatever. We never fell off. We didn't have a casualty, and we had freedom of movement, really. We didn't have to be afraid to walk to school or back. If there was danger there, we were not made aware of it.
Now they cut the banks down pretty quickly.
Well,
and
they
we
plow the
talked
sidewalks.
And they plow the sidewalks. We talked a lot about that. Those were simpler times.
They would put up snow fences, and we could ski off the hill. I mean, we had little skis, of course, and we could dig in and all kinds of play and stay out for hours and hours and never worry about the cold. Skate on the lake, swim in the summer, skate in the winter. It was a very peaceful time to grow up here.
It's good to mention that from time to time because it's so different now, all these years later. We do so much to protect our kids from the elements that sometimes we don't teach them how to be resilient, how to react to their environment. In those days, as I've said many times here and in my newspaper column, our parents would teach us how to do things, teach us how to entertain ourselves,
Exactly.
and then send us outside. And we came in when it was lunchtime or supper time
Or at dusk.
or at dusk.
And we didn't go very far. I've often said to my children, I would give anything if I could have you grow up in the atmosphere that I grew up in on Elm Street.
But you can't.
No.
Unfortunately, you can't. A lot of people will give up the city life, the urban life, to live out in the country and try to replicate those days. But there's so many things that are different in this day and age. Communication is one of those things. We just have contact instantly with anything we want on that old internet, don't we, huh?
Patience is a word that's going to fall out of the Webster Dictionary soon.
Well-
We're not taught patience. Our children want everything yesterday.
Not only that, they won't walk 500 feet to the store. They'll jump in the car, right? You walk everywhere.
I will say my great-grandsons will walk up the street to see me any chance they get. So I appreciate that.
You know, it's nice to grow up in a town and then live there as an adult and an older adult because you become part of the fabric of the place, don't you, huh?
I have to think about that.
Yeah, you do become, you're a fixture, right?
Oh, my
From what
goodness.
I hear, you're an icon. Let me see what other
Icon.
adjectives I can think of.
Pretty soon they'll stand me on one of those pedestals at St. Pat's, right?
So where'd you go to school?
First St. Patrick's, and then Rouses Point High School, and then SUNY Plattsburgh. Between Rouses Point High School and SUNY Plattsburgh, there was a 19-year gap where I started
No
to raise a
kidding.
family. And when my oldest daughter was a junior in nursing school, I decided it was time to do something. So my husband had 3 of us in school for a number of years because the 2 younger girls came in. I was in college with them. And I said, if you happen to meet me in the cafeteria or near the pond, please walk on by. Because a mother doesn't need a daughter. But the truth was they didn't need mom on campus, really. But we lived through it. We made it.
That's wonderful. So you got a bachelor's degree in what?
Education, and I got a master's degree in education.
Did you start teaching right away?
First product. First grade.
Come on. Is that true, Jim? It's true. Come on over here a second. You can chat with us for a minute. You were in first grade with her in the first year you taught,
Yes.
which was,
1973.
wow.
We were in the old section of St. Mary's School in Champlain, New York, for the first half of the year, and then they threw us a curve when we came back from Christmas vacation. We were in the new section, where Mrs. Racine had appointed the room, and she painted it a blue that I've come to associate with her, and it was very
Isn't
magical.
that cool? Doesn't that make you feel good?
I feel
And it goes around and comes around, doesn't it?
this cosmic justice.
That's what it is. Isn't that kind
It's
of...
better than money in the bank. My dividends have been greater, much greater.
You know...
But I stepped on his toes the first, new teacher, new student. And Sister had said, first graders here, third graders there. And here came this boy, and he's husky, and he's tall. And he was taller than the first graders, and I took a look at him, and not knowing anything, I said, third grade's over there. And he never reacted to me.
So he went over there?
No.
Oh, he
He
didn't?
stood his ground, and he's been standing it for 32 years. So I repeated, third grade is over there. And he said, I am a first grader. I said, okay. And he forgave me, apparently.
Isn't that cool? And you never forgot that year, did you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely. I remember that year so well, and I continue to visit Mrs. Racine. I was lucky enough to have her some in second grade and for history in fifth grade, and
That doesn't happen much anymore.
I've been learning from this lady for all those years.
Except that he hasn't realized yet, and I'm letting the cat out of the bag here today. 32 years later, subtly, our positions are changing. Teacher, student. And he's a word man. And he will take prefixes and examine the meaning and the root word and turn them around and pull meaning out of them that I've never even thought of. And I love it when he starts doing that because I learn so much.
Did you also go to school at Plattsburgh State, Jim?
No, I didn't. I would think of, when I talk with Mrs. Racine, I haven't said this to you, but I once had a chance to have a book signed by that Robert Fulghum. You remember he wrote
Sure.
everything I need to know I learned in kindergarten.
Yeah.
Well, I was slow. It took me an extra year. So everything I needed to know I learned in first grade. And then there's this big empty space of life, and then I met my wife, and we married in 1996 and set up our home here in Rouses Point.
So you've never strayed very far away?
Not in my heart, no.
Well, where did you go? Did you travel other places?
A little bit.
Did you?
But I've been fortunate to hang out with good people. I've learned a lot. So
Well, where did the interest in history start?
that's a good question. First grade for sure. And I remember too, like she said 1973, but boy, was I influenced by all of your enthusiasm for the U.S. bicentennial, 1976. She was sharing so much with the whole school. She was sharing so much. In fact, I think you made that trip to Philadelphia and you brought us those little Liberty Bell banks, and I still have mine.
It was Gettysburg, Pennsylvania,
Oh, well,
Either way.
whichever way.
it's the Liberty Bell.
With Honolulu, it was the Shell. Were you there then?
I remember one of your trips. Every time she traveled, she would bring gifts for all of us. And the first time she went to Hawaii, boy, that captured my imagination.
Oh, boy.
And she came back with, among a lot of other things, I still have this little multicolored crayon pencil. And it's full of like 32 colors, and you could switch them,
It must be obsolete by now.
Well, it's a little busted, but I'm not getting rid of it.
Isn't that neat? They were all your kids, weren't they?
Yeah,
Isn't
they
that the
were.
way it is when you're a teacher for the younger grades? They're all your kids.
His father made sure that I followed him along. I never missed a report card, thanks to Big Jim. And he would come in after school, and when he, as I probably already told Calvin, this young man is much more philosophical than I've ever been, ever will be, ever want to be. I'm happy with him that way. And he would be pondering one of life's questions, and he'd sit at the reading table, come back to first grade in the afternoons, and we would try to figure out and settle things. And this has never stopped until, well, you married, know that, and we still, but he happened to buy the right house in the right village, and I happened to go by at the right time, and everything just went right back to, he focuses, for example, Mrs. Racine, I'm studying Adirondack camps. Oh, that's wonderful. And we listened to that. Then one day, at the end of a parent line, there stands Jim with his hands behind his back, and he said, I've been focusing on Teddy Roosevelt, Mrs. Racine.
Oh, come
And I
on.
said, yes, okay.
Is it?
So he came this book, and he had inscribed it and everything to Mrs. Racine from James, dated. And he said, everything I wanted to know about Teddy Roosevelt is in this one book. I didn't have to really read the numerous books I've read. And that is one of the favorite books that I own on my library shelf, talking about keepsakes.
See that?
And he's
Isn't
right.
that cool?
It's a good book.
Oh, we could talk about Teddy Roosevelt for a long time as we celebrated the 100th anniversary of the teddy bear within the last couple of years, and his wonderful residence in Oyster Bay on Long Island that I visited many times. But history is fantastic. And we have lots of focuses here in the North Country where we travel around from town to town from time to time and talk to people who are interested in history. We've been showing a recent series of old photographs from the Clinton County Historical Museum.
I saw a couple of those, bro.
And a lot of the stuff we haven't identified, but I've been getting phone calls. I don't know if Calvin's been getting it.
Ken has.
Ken has. Ken Ray, who's worked as a volunteer there for 10, 11 years now, has been getting phone calls. We looked at these old photographs and wondered, what was that place? What was that place?
You
And I didn't-
identified one, or he did, I'm not sure, as the old Catholic church at the top of State Street, and it's not. The thing you
It
think
wouldn't
is
have
the
been
Catholic
me,
church,
because
it's
I
not.
wouldn't know.
No, it was, I think that was the Cherubusco Church after I looked at it again.
Yeah, it wasn't the one here, so I thought, well, they'll
Yeah.
figure it out.
Well, we mentioned Cherubusco in there somewhere. We try to cover all the bases, but I'm not familiar with all those landmarks up here. That's why looking at every one of those pictures is like looking at something brand new for me for the first time. But it is fun because people watching the program say, what's the matter with those guys? Don't they know that's...
It's the fabric. It's the foundation of where you are today. And if you never look back, you're going to lose it and make mistakes again. You have to study the history not to make the same mistakes again.
You know, otherwise you're doomed to... History's doomed to repeat itself.
Repeat
Yeah.
itself, and it shouldn't. Not exactly.
Well, that's a good thing. We might as well wax philosophical here while we're at it, right? So what do you do for a living now, Jim?
I'm a groundskeeper at Wyeth.
Oh, wonderful. So you didn't have to work today?
No, I was in at 4:45 this morning for the snow.
You were?
Yeah.
For the snow?
Yeah.
Groundskeepers have to get snow away too, you know. So you taught for how many years, Donna?
22. Coming at it late. When I started, it was continuing ed. And I estimated it would take 7 years. But 3 years later, I had a bachelor's and 4.5 masters. But I taught after the first 3. And so I had projected 20, but before my health gave out, I made 22. So I reached my goal.
Isn't that fantastic? And Calvin was telling me, who did she teach that I'm supposed to remember?
David Manette.
David Manette?
Yes, the artist.
Tell
Yes.
me about it. You gave him his first sketch pad?
Yes.
Is that possible?
Because I was trying to bring him out from himself. David is a very self-contained and he was a little self-contained little boy, and he was a marvelous reader but unsure about math, so he'd get away from me on that. And he'd look out the window and I thought, well, let's give him a pad and see what happens. Maybe he'll put 2 and 2 is 4 or
You're
something.
the one that started that, huh?
And when they called me in, he waited for me down at the Council at the Arts. And it was like not a day had gone by. Like he had just walked out of that classroom. And it was just wonderful. Have you ever seen anything he's done?
Yeah, it's
The details?
amazing.
He is
Unbelievable.
an incredible artist, and we've had the good fortune of interviewing several people like him who are just phenomenal, people that you would never guess. But look at the great career that he's got now.
He's so self-contained and self-assured, and he grew up and it was okay. It all fell into place. I'm very proud of David. He should be proud of himself about whatever.
Well, you've really touched a lot of lives. When I talk about your kids in first grade, and you taught what, second grade too? Or just-
Second grade social, 5th grade social, 6th grade social, 5th grade reading at times when I went in there to do that. And they would say, well, she doesn't really teach first grade because she's always out. Well, I was very possessive of those first graders. So what I might talk, let's say, I think first period in the morning, I went into 5th grade, someone from 5th grade came into my room. So it was like phonics, but I always also taught it in the reading group. There was always also a sound time. It wasn't an introductory thing. I taught another class when my students were at lunch. I taught another class when my students went to gym. And we would switch first grade religion for second grade social. So it was kind of a reciprocal, always going on. No. When they were taught something new, I was very selfish about being the one to present it.
Well, when you look back on it, that's a wonderful legacy.
I only had 20 years, Gordy. I had to do 40 in 20. And that was
So you
that
did
was the
it. You
focus.
did it double speed. That's all.
full speed.
That's great. So here you are now. How long have you been a historian here in the village?
I was appointed in January of 2003, but I went away for the winter, so I was sworn in April. So I'll be 2 years, really, in April.
But you were very interested in it before that.
I was interested in history, and I never really focused deliberately on village history, although I was living it in a way. And
You sure
suddenly
were.
here it was, and I thought, like when I saw the North Countrymen, somebody said, "What are you going to do about those?" Well, I had a solution to that, Gordy. I was going to start with 1928, which is down here somewhere, and read every one of them, all through, no problem.
Come on.
No, I'm not kidding. That's exactly what I was going to do. Well, I think I've gotten to 30. Well, now you start seeing the papers.
Yeah.
So then I started to have leads and do genealogies, and history I had to look up. And so I began to jump around. And then I started doing the newspaper legals, obituaries, scrapbooking at home and bringing it here because I only had an hour left, don't you see? And I didn't have time for the North Countrymen. I have not turned a page since the first of the year. I've been that busy up here. And this week, I've been here 4 days this week. I know my office hours are 10 to 4, but it's usually 10 to 6, whatever, at any day. And I will come up here on a Friday because I've discovered everybody's winding down on Friday. And I get the sound of the place to myself, and I can get into the North Countrymen. And maybe I will live long enough to get to 1982 someday. But this is the greatest resource.
There's a
local
lot of
historian.
history
Oh,
in the local newspaper. Sure.
and I don't have to travel to get it.
It's wonderful.
I
And
just
Calvin
don't
was
want
part of it for, what, a couple of years, Cal?
A couple of years, yeah.
70,
75 and 76.
75,
mainly, yeah.
76. And, you know, I've known so many people who've either written for or been involved as employees of the North Countrymen over the years. So that's a good resource.
Well, the beautiful part of it is, somehow, because of this round-robin sharing of information, I'll have your mic before you know it, at the liquor store, I can read in 28 and come up with a person's name, and it'll be, I know that person.
Don't you
I know
love
what
it?
he looks like. I've seen her before, you know, and I can usually place them in a house on a certain street or whatever. So we've finally come up with a format for all this research, and we call it Street Scenes Old and New. But what we're doing is we're putting the people in the slot. And while I was doing Lake Street, which I thought would take one binder, is really now 2 and going to be 3. It's a loose leaf so I can adjust and move, add things.
What kinds of things do you put in there?
Everything.
Really?
Everything.
Street scenes, old and new. I like that.
I put the old pictures in. Ben Arno's hopped on board. He's bringing the new pictures so we could bring our archives in the Ross room up to
Does that
date.
sound familiar, Calvin? Yeah, we've done lots of things like that.
Huh?
Isn't
And-
that neat? What a great idea.
So, well, what was I going to do with all this research? You know, Addie's been after me to write, and about what? It took 2 years for me to learn enough and be comfortable enough. Now I'm going to start to write. I'm ready. I'm really ready to do it. And Jim will proofread me, and again, the teacher will take care of that, and we should be all right.
As we've said many times on this program, every day you step into this office, you're creating another page in history.
Well,
And you
every
gotta-
day.
You have to think of it that way. All of us are.
I think I buried myself in the past for 2 years, trying to grasp many, many things. And now it's coming up to the future. And Benny has given us this with the photos. He will have a picture. I might have the old picture, and Benny might have a house, oh goodness, 40 years ago. And then they will put siding on the house, and Benny will get that. And then the house will burn, and he gets the fire, and then he gets the empty lot. You know, he brings it through. So he's an asset, I'll tell you what.
And you know what? Everybody who engages in what you're doing in the small towns and villages, and as you mentioned before, neighborhoods in our country, looks at this position in a different way. And that's a very healthy thing. For many years, a lot of historians just clipped the things out of the newspaper and kept the scrapbooks. That's still a part of it. But there's so many other ways you can expand this.
Well, the only way I look at new scrapbooks, and I usually turn out one a year. I haven't gone over it, but the first one was blue, and when I put it on the shelf, I knew I'd accomplished something. I had
Go
kept
with blue again,
yeah,
Jim.
I'd kept the history of that year current as far as the archives were concerned, and that's how I look at a scrapbook, new ones. But I respect old scrapbooks. Ultimately, the 46 that's missing in here.
How can you not respect them?
Well, every lead I had led to 46, and I thought I have to go to Plattsburgh. And there's a 46 scrapbook that John Ross kept in the John Ross room. I don't have to go to Plattsburgh for 1946.
Isn't
It's
that
there
cool?
in a scrapbook.
That's a whole other discussion. We could spend the 2 hours of this program discussing scrapbooks, and I've often written about it. I have a lot of very old scrapbooks with wonderful information. Somebody hands me one. Somebody dies, and we've talked about this before, and what do their kids do with all the old photographs which aren't written on, but throw them away?
Yes.
And I try,
Definitely.
once in a while they get diverted to my
I'll show you a
house.
photograph later that Bob salvaged as a very small snapshot. And he gave me an envelope, and he said, "Donna, I think these people are related to you." And I'll show you what I
Is that cool?
enlarged it as much as I could without losing the effect. But it's a very relevant snapshot as far as I'm concerned.
And you found out who they were?
Oh, I knew who they were as soon as I
Oh.
looked at them.
I should have known. Huh? Okay, we got to put a new battery in. This is got we all need to be recharged for one moment. We'll be right back with Donna Racine. Addie Shields and Bob Venn. Calvin reminds us as he put a new battery in that we should mention last names because we're familiar with all these people. Addie Shields, of course, is talk about icons. The Clinton County historian and a wealth of information. She can discourse on more subjects of sleep than I ever dreamed of awake. She is an amazing lady who's been involved with history. And you know what I love about talking with Addie? She'll stand in a field and she will transport me back 250 years with such a graphic description of what the area and the lake shore was right and what soldiers were marching over
knew there was
here
gonna be a battle in
and
that field.
who lived over here, and it's just amazing. I stand there with my mouth open, and but by the time she's finished, I get a picture in my mind of what it's all about.
Definitely.
Yeah, she's a neat lady.
1 hour with Addie Shields, for me, is better than 10 workshops. And she's the lady who has guided me. I've had to turn to her because I had no training and pretty much skating on my own. And Addie has, and she's the one who has said, right, because you had to have a photographic memory. And if you have a stroke, Donna, where's it all going to end up? Not that I mean you're going to have a stroke, Donna, but if you do.
That's why she tells you to write.
Right, and the last time she said, I didn't zero in on my family. Anything that you see laundry here was here when I came.
Oh, no kidding.
And I thought that that was the wrong focus, sort of a self-centered focus, so I stayed away from
I like it. I don't mind.
But Addie said, first start to record your own family.
Well,
And I
of
thought,
course.
no. And she said, if you don't, who will? Because I'm the oldest left who remember the old laundries. So I have started to do that. Get them in there, put them where they belong.
You know, nowadays it's more a function. I don't know if it's more a function, but it's very much a function of historians to do the genealogy. And it's interesting and it's very confusing to me because I've never done any genealogy on my father's side, on the Littles in the family. And it's such a daunting thing for me to even think about it. People like you kind of make it a little bit easier to get into it.
People like me might be able to get you some, from speaking for myself now, startup information. I may be able to close a gap, give you a link. But the best genealogy people are the family members themselves because they have old tales, aunts, uncles to talk to.
And when you get
These
old
photographs.
like me, there aren't too many of those aunts and uncles
No,
and
so
grandfathers
you ask
and
questions when
fathers.
you should, you know, which is the,
Yep.
and like I said, I didn't ask questions, but somehow it sank in, and we're back to the Laundrie brothers. That would have been on what was then Lower State, but now Upper Montgomery, and I'll show you a picture of the building, which I plan to put there sooner or later. It was torn down a couple of years ago, and I have a puzzle about that building while we're talking about it. This bottle here is a David Burrill. Now, I'm not sure just where here he bottled, but David Burrill would be the maternal uncle or the brother-in-law, A. Laundrie and son. He would be A. Laundrie's brother-in-law.
Oh, no kidding.
Right. His sisters had married Laundrie brothers, the Burrill girls, Julia and Sophia. So whether my grandfather picked up or my great-grandfather picked up where David left off for some reason, but I do have a deed where my grandfather bought that building in 1897 from Rufus Heaton, a lawyer, local lawyer. And then I pick him up again where it's A. Laundrie and son, which would have been Alexi and George, the oldest son. So you come to Laundrie brothers. The older brother was working in a bank in Massachusetts and very happy with his life. And my grandfather was running, he repaired railroad watches and having a family. He was busy. And then the oldest brother died suddenly in 1913, and Grandpa called in the sons. And there's where you start with Laundrie brothers. And they were entrepreneurs in advertising, and how they calmly went, and the first advertising would say Brothers of George B. Laundrie, the guy that they trusted to buy the liquor from. So you could go in there and you would bring your, or buy a bottle, but you could keep your bottle. And my cousin Tim told me that downstairs it was like a soda fountain you pushed. All right, you might want apricot brandy. So they'd go there and they'd push that jigger of apricot, get the brandy in there, shake it up, and away you went.
No kidding.
Oh, yes.
See the interesting wire
And there are
tops.
labels and whatnot. So they
Stop
ran as brothers, oh my goodness, till Prohibition. And that's another thing I never thought about. What happened when what happened, Tim said, they locked their door one night with roughly $50,000 worth of stock in the wholesale retail liquor. And the revenue people were there breaking it the next morning. They lost that. 3 families. It supported the 2 brothers and their parents. And so one went into like a convenience store type thing. My grandfather went into United Cigar and treaded water for the next 14 or so years, repaired watches, turned it into a jewelry store, and as soon as Prohibition was off, he went back into the business he knew. And people would come in,
Isn't that
yep,
amazing?
and they'd say,
right here, United Cigar
that's
Store.
Grandpa. Yep. I have a
Have you
picture of
been
him
on
standing
it?
in front of it.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
And people would come in the liquor store, and I'd be reading back there, and they'd say, Bill, we're having such and such a party. What should we have? And he would go on and say, well, you'll like this, it's sweet, or you'll like this, it's dry. And if you combine this with this, such and such. So I said to him one day, Grandpa, how do you know that this is like this? Because he didn't drink. He never took a drink.
Come
and
on.
He reached over and he took those little books that he said, I read the books. And he would go by that.
Amazing.
Yep.
He was a teetotaler.
He was a teetotaler, definitely.
To use a word that was coined about that time period.
Yeah. And then the other brother never went back into the liquor. He's the one that had the old stone building, the Sunoco station up there, and the pool tables were in there and so on, and his son built one next door, and they went into the garage business.
Let's talk a little bit about some more of the items on this side. We've opened the glass door so there won't be so much of a glare for the camera.
Arsene brought the sports annuals in. Dick, his father, who was a classmate of mine, so I sort of mother Arsene now, brought in these from the Rouses Point High School field, 59, different things. This is, of course, the original Union Free High School, 1881.
Arsene, who?
Letourneau, Dick Letourneau.
Uh-huh.
I'm too familiar here. And this building is still on State Street, where you see the Border Patrol lined up. It was immigration. A hat form from probably the 50s, where ladies would buy the form and decorate it and do their thing. Like I say, most of this was here. Then your Main Street, Holland, Windmill Point. The band,
I love it.
you said listen to the photograph, you can hear what?
Yeah, I said, how do you know they're playing the Old Rugged Cross?
Old
I said,
Rugged
just
Cross,
get up
right.
close to it and you can hear on a
I know,
hill far away.
I knew L.C. Muckett. I knew Clarence Mayo, Jack Vasco. You know him, Calvin.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that I knew Margaret Bertrand. And of course I knew Harold Mayo, who was the leader of the Crescent Band, and I think he was the leader of the MAI band for years and years.
Oh, sure.
And
Very
the
well
other one
known
was a
down
barber.
there.
The father was a barber for years and years on Lake Street.
So this Crescent Orchestra was a local orchestra around here for many, many years?
It was the band to dance to, I understand. They were very good.
This picture dates back, do we have any idea how far it dates back? Is it 20s?
I'd say 20s,
Yeah.
definitely. And then Mr. Muckett opened bought the building where McDonough's are now. It had been Frank Party's store, and he bought it in the 30s after Mr. Party died, and he opened men's ready-to-wear store.
What did you say this was? Is that a hat?
A form, yeah. You would buy the hat form, and then if you were creative, you would work on that form and end up with a hat. The label is going down. Don had collected that one, and I don't really.
It says late 1800s.
I don't think so. I hate to differ. Look at that hat again.
Well, I don't know. It looks like it was just made and lacquered, and everything looks so fresh.
It doesn't
and
look
new
like
on
the
it.
style of the late, but you know,
Who
women
would
wore
know?
different
I
things.
certainly
Late
wouldn't know.
1800s. Oh no. It's 20th century, definitely.
So it's a hat form?
It was started out as a hat form. Someone put the little flowers on it and decorated
Oh, I
it, and
see what you mean.
you'd buy a blank form and bring it to life.
Oh, my goodness. So you got buildings. What's this now?
This is where we are right
This is
now.
this building right here, right? Okay.
Like, go out the window. Go to the window, Gordy, and I can see you waving.
The price of the lot when they bought I can tell you a little bit about that. The lot that this building is on was bought from William Turner for $175.
Oh, boy.
Neat.
Times have changed a little bit, huh?
Changed, really.
So these are the grounds of this
Aren't they
building?
beautiful?
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Do we know when these photographs were taken?
I know nothing about the photograph.
I can only guess, based on the looks of this, that it was either the 30s or early 40s.
My cousin does that for me. He checks the vehicles
Yeah.
and tries to give me a year.
John Southwick does that too.
Does he? John's very good at that, yes.
He came in when talking about Ken Ray in the photos there.
Oh,
He
yeah.
says that car was 1928, so
Isn't that amazing?
I'm not
It's
sure
amazing.
what model it was.
Now you go back up to the top. I can't see the middle photograph. I don't know what that is.
Well,
The B&H
it's
station?
some carriages. It looks like the station.
Horse carriages, the one that we have a copy of.
Let's open, close one door and open another one.
Yeah, one of those is on for sale on eBay right now.
Chris Trombley had one made
Really?
up for us for the Ross Room, or the Historical Society collection, and it's really a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that pops up on eBay regularly. There's one on there right now.
Just like that?
Yeah.
I think
And
there's a postcard.
Yeah.
Like that.
probably an enlargement from a postcard then.
No, it is a postcard. It's
It
on,
is?
It's on sale. That's probably an enlargement. But right there, yeah.
That somebody has hand colored.
And your next building is the Windsor Hotel. For a short time, it was the America House. Then it went to the Windsor. They tried to change it to the Columbia. The clients didn't like it as the Columbia, so they went back to Windsor. But that original brick part was built by a Mr. Webb, who ran the stone store. And his partner was Ralph Rowden. And they bought the quarry in Kings Bay. And they quarried the stone for Fort Montgomery.
Oh, there you go.
43, 44. Mr. Rowden built Greystone Manor up here that the Pods live in now.
Oh, sure.
And when the Mexican War started, the government froze all funds. And the partners had stockpiled, and they were left with this material. Mr. Rowden used a very little bit of it to finish Greystone, but he couldn't weather the financial storm. And Mr. Rowden's wife died while the fort was being built, and she was so well liked that the workers wore black armbands for a year.
Wow.
Respect for her.
How's that for a tribute?
I think it's a great
Yeah.
tribute.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What's the other building
This
over?
building is also known as the Saxony now.
Oh, the Saxony. Now
Yes.
we know, yes,
The next one is the Chapman Block, which burned in, I'm trying to think, 77 or 78, 77. That one belonged to my grandfather. And for many years, he lived in the apartment. There was an apartment on this side, 12, 13 rooms. KSC were up
pretty
there.
good sized apartment, huh?
Catholic Daughters. The post office was on this end. I remember old Jake Toner always sweeping the floors in there. And then mail, you had customs who check the mail in the next section when I was a little girl. And my dad had a restaurant in the next section. But it wasn't always like that. There were other, and then the wooden section was always there, and there was a barber or a beautician in there, always one or the other. Or maybe there at one time there was a lady who made hats, if I remember correctly. But then we come to our Vietnam veterans. I did not know Mr. Huntley, but I did know Bob LaFountain and Tom Eldridge. And Bob LaFountain was coming home shortly when a sniper got him, the Marine. And I've talked to his mother, and we're going to get together and have a crying old interview. And the four LaFountain brothers, or 4 or 5, his father was also a Marine, but all of his father's brothers, they were all, I think there were 5 in World War II.
No kidding.
So they
All in the Marine Corps, you think?
No.
No?
His father was, but no, not all. Some were Army, different branches of the service. But they were over there.
Yeah, Leon was at Iwo Jima. We did a story with him.
Yes, I
on
saw
Iwo
him on
Jima.
tape.
Yes, and of course Robert LaFountain. It's the disabled American veterans are named after this. The Robert LaFountain Post. So this is the man it's named after.
His mother's very proud of that, Calvin. Very
I
proud
bet
of
you she
that.
is. I bet you she is. And you've got the VFW 8722 hat and the New Liberty Theater program behind that.
All right.
I'm just looking at the program.
I'm not sure where that New Liberty stumps me. I know that the Kutchers built an opera house, but I'm not sure where the New Liberty was.
Oh, sure.
And they would have to get a license to show these movies, like from the village board or something, back in the early 1900s. And they'd have to make an agreement, like they might charge $0.25 a person, and I forgot what the license might charge. They might charge maybe $25.
Gloria Swanson. Look at
There you go.
in a society scandal. September 28th and 29th. Boy, was that the flapper era. Look at that hairstyle.
That was 19. Let me think. I'm trying to think of when Jack Kennedy was born. I'm going to go after her through Edward Kennedy.
Wow.
Yeah, it has to be the 20s. Definitely the 20s.
Isn't that great? That's a prize right there. But you don't know where the building was. You better get on a quest.
No, I've learned not to go on a quest.
Uh-oh.
No. Because you miss everything when you go on a focused quest, which I started to do in the beginning. Now I just keep it in my head, and all of a sudden something will happen. I know where to
come
put
along.
it, and I keep a lot of loose strings going.
She hasn't got to look any further than those books back there. I'm sure they advertised in the North Countryman. That's 1928.
But they don't say where.
They don't say this.
I've had my eye out for it. Right.
They don't even give the address.
I
Isn't
want to
that
put it
funny?
on Pratt Street, but I don't know if that's because I know that.
Lyric was there, yeah.
Well, Wilfred Kutcher's Opera House was there, and I'm not sure. And of course, the house on the corner of State, next door to you, State and Maple, was first a school and then a hall of some sort. I'm not sure Liberty Theater wasn't there. So one week in my mind it's here, and the next week it's there until I'm sure.
And there is a
I'm
Liberty
not going
Street.
to pick it.
There's
Yes.
a Liberty Street, so
Which was formerly Patriot Street. So I don't know if it was Liberty when the Liberty Theater existed, or if it was Patriot or what.
somebody will help you on this, that's for sure.
It's out there. Jim tells me that when I get
It's out
discouraged. He says, you'll find it, you'll find
It's
it.
out there. Very, very often this program helps a little bit because it jogs memories. So what else do we have here?
Well, you have some metalwork from Fort Montgomery, which is why it's with the picture. The link, the chain link, and whatever those other things are. But that's great. It sort of makes you feel worthwhile. And then below that you have, again, my classmate Richard Letourneau ran for mayor and was mayor. And his class letter, his R. And we were so proud because you got small ones as JVs and bigger ones as varsity, and we graduated and got the bigger letters.
Of course.
And then you go down to Crook Brothers, who were in the stone store at the foot of Champlain Street, Route 11. And we can do you a whole story on Crook Brothers
Really?
when we get to the pictures.
Okay, we'll do it. This is a kind of a nice tray. This is Fort Montgomery with a picture of it. I didn't even know they made such a thing.
Oh, well, they took advantage of souvenir hunters
they?
just like they do today. Oh, yes. Especially the local, like Frank Party's store and places like that, they would have postcards made, Slingsby's, postcards and dishes and so on made up especially for their store. So it worked out very well.
Do you have a lot of different items that you don't have on display? A lot of historians just don't have display
No,
space.
I've dug in and taken stuff out and put it out. And they gave me a new file, well, the court clerk didn't need a certain file cabinet, so now it's inventoried in my office, and it's given me a little extra room, which is good. But I'm filling it up, and I won't refuse anything. The Chapman Block stone, there's from the fire for the Chapman Block.
Sure.
Benny Arno gave me a stone from the building near the Park Restaurant that was torn down because of a fire. And I have a picture of that building that goes with the stone. He gave me the last bridge book handed out
Oh, no kidding.
before the new bridge opened, And he gave me a shingle from the lake house, which has a history from here to there, and a star, a wooden star, that was on the Laundry Brothers Wholesale Retail Building on Lower State, with all of the fancy stuff around. There were stars in the pattern, and I have one of the stars in there. So,
Well, that's good.
really good.
And you have lots of things behind you in these cabinets. You must have a ball getting these things set up. You want to talk about anything
Well,
special?
don't ask me
Donna?
who the man and woman are. I can't identify them, but they looked just right, and they were here. The diploma belongs to William Johnson, and at those times, like Mr. Hoke's diploma over here,
Huge. I was reading that. Look at the size of that thing.
Jenny Mary Hoke. You might have one graduate, or two, or three. And so the diploma was something really grand.
Really special.
And the ribbon, see, is faded out.
That dates back to
And so-
1870,
Yeah.
1892.
And Jenny Hoke was alive. I remember her.
Really?
She was a seamstress, and she was fantastic. She did the costumes a lot for Mrs. Irving's early dance reviews and so on. So Bill's is fairly large, and Mary and Bob Rasco found that in the attic of their house on Chapman Street.
Huh.
And Ralph Gilpin was called to Line Mountain to pick up boxes of pictures. Mr. King, I think, had died, and they wanted to give these pictures back because it was the Rouses Point Johnson studio. Now we have William Johnson. So Ralph said, come and see me, so I did. And I found Bill, the engagement picture, and the wedding picture. And I felt they should go with the diploma.
I think that's perfect.
They went there. And the tea set, oh, that tea set has set me on a jaunt, was the Rachel Craig Turner came in from Fitzroy Harbor, Ottawa, or Ontario, Fitzroy Harbor, Ontario, and lived where Jim lives now from 1969. Her son died in 1959, the last member of the family. So thus the tea set came this way. But this is the same Captain Turner who taught me history lessons of the village when I was a little
Oh,
girl.
isn't that cool?
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
And that's where we started again, because I was so happy when I heard that Jim had bought Captain Turner's house. One history buff buying a historian's house, it was like very wonderful. And I said to Jim, he walked so straight and erect, and he had such a marvelous, elegant bearing, and a beautiful smile, and so knowledgeable and well-read. And Jim is a very well-read young man, astonishing. So we talked about this, and I said, I have a good picture of your house. He said, I have a picture of it too. So we shared pictures. We exchanged that. And then he said, I think I have some things that belonged to Captain Turner. And I thought captain meant a tugboat captain, because that's what they were. And we started in his gym. Do you have that yearbook?
Yes.
Oh, we found a treasure. And
Don't you love it? When you can
yes.
find treasures.
well,
as-
Captain Turner didn't throw anything out. Oh,
Gee, it's almost like Gordy Little, huh?
yeah.
Want to use the table?
Calvin Castine. Would it be easier to put it on the table?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes,
Well,
yes, yes.
try not to trip you up, Jim. Oh, you can talk, you know. These are talkies.
Go ahead, tell
Who
him.
you got there?
Captain Turner was this Rouses Point native son who went to Cornell, and he graduated, I think it's 1895, as you see, Sibley College of Engineering. And then, and I'm sure living on bustling Lake Champlain had a big influence on him, he went into the U.S. Coast Guard.
Ah.
And he had a successful career there, obviously, from the things he left behind, and he retired from that, and then we know 1930. Thank you. And Mrs. Racine tells me, well, it's funny how when she came over to talk to us at the house after my wife and I moved in, I said, did you know this fella? And she said, know him. She said, I gave him a ride in a hot pink.
Henry J. Kaiser, the color of rose-colored nail polish. It was the worst color. My dad bought
And you
this
had a
car.
Kaiser?
My father bought this. It was a compact, and now I see them in Easter colors, and I think I shouldn't have even, But Dad said, Donna, take the car. Well, you're a senior in high school, right? It's spring, take the car. And go to Captain Turner's during your noon hour and take him for a ride. He's so curious about the car, so off I went. And he had to do something, and I went in, and I went into his den, his office. Oh, I was so impressed I haven't forgotten it till today. And there he is in this. And I took him for a ride, and Henry J. Kaiser, and I looked back, he kept his hands on his knees. He just, not clutching, but calmly. And I was wondering, did I drive all right when I looked back? And he would chuckle every once in a while. And he looked at the inside of the car, and he was in his 80s then, early 80s. And he was just a marvelous, marvelous influence. And when he died, the funeral home was where Bud Ashline lives now for a very short time. And I went down, and I said to Jim, I considered him an only child. I never saw anyone with him. He was always alone. And Oral said, hi, how you doing, kid? So on and so forth, Oral Parsons. And I went in, and there wasn't a flower, there wasn't a person, and there was, and I will become possessive now, my Captain Turner.
Huh?
And he was in uniform.
No kidding.
And the cord on the epaulets was the size of your little finger. It wasn't this thread-like. It was, and it didn't button straight. It had an angle. And the bow tie that I usually saw was a very narrow, and on the foot of the coffin was a hat, a Horatio Hornblower hat with stripes. And I said to Jim, I've got to know, I've got to know. Well, of course, United States Coast Guard Service. That's what capped. And Jim, tell me, you came into the Rouse room one night and said, hey, Mrs. Racine, want to hear some trivia?
What?
Well, at the moment, I'm stuck for what she means, but...
When you decided to get more information on his professional life and you called.
Oh, that was right. We've been investigating him, and I said, well, if he's a graduate of the Coast Guard Academy, maybe they can answer some questions. And I phoned their information office. And so I came in that night after that experience, and I said, do you want to know some trivia? Guess what they play when you're on hold at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy?
The Marine Corps hymn? No.
Wrong. It's Sousa, John Philip Sousa,
Oh,
Stars and Stripes Forever. Yeah. I felt like I should stand at attention.
Oh, that would do it for me. One of my all-time favorite songs. So they gave you information?
Oh, yes, the lady was very helpful. She sent, I guess it was the archivist who I talked to, and she sent photocopied pages of his dates of service and tours of duty and the ships he served on and the rank at those particular times, and it was very interesting. And then when we went back to what he left in the house, we found it was all a match to these records he had. Like every year they'd publish an annual that kept up with the classes of the Coast Guard graduates, and it was interesting. There you were looking at the new copy on this hand, the computer-generated copy, and here you were looking at the original on the other hand. So I felt pretty privileged.
Well, you had lots of connections with the history of your house then. Is that why you bought it? Did you know it was his house?
No.
Pure chance? Come on.
We, my wife and I were getting ready for our wedding in June 1996, and I figured we'd be residing in the apartment I had with Mrs. Ferdinand St. Maxons in Champlain. It was a great privilege to live next door to her. But I was talking with a friend at Wyeth, and he said, there's a house for sale on State Street across from where I used to live, and I think Kim, my fiance, would really like it, he said, he says, it's a Martha Stewart house. So, wanting to please her, I said, oh, we better see that. And it's funny. I had looked at the house for years when I was working in Vermont and driving by 5 days a week. The funny thing was, it wasn't the main house, it was the little side house. And I said, boy, I'd like to get that for a song, live like a hermit, but I ended up with the big house. Lucky me.
And the small house.
And the small house, yeah.
And now you got both of them.
Yes, both of them.
So have you done a lot of renovations, or what have you done?
Oh, well, we decided to make family first. So we have a son, Josh, who's 6.5, and Jack, who's 2. And it's been, we've lived in some of the house. There's a lot of the house that's still under renovation.
Is it that big? How big is it? How many rooms?
I lose count.
Really?
I guess it's big.
You know, if you would stop off for a
13
minute, I
or
can get
so.
you material that'll show you exactly that.
Can you really? Well, let's pause and get it then. We'll continue in a minute. All right, magically, no time has transpired, and we have the picture before us. Go ahead.
All right. This is State Street, roughly in the 1880s or 90s. You see St. Patrick's original church at the head of the street.
Huh.
And that's the entrance to the cemetery now. Streets are not paved, obviously, plank sidewalks. And this is Captain Turner's family home right here. And Jim had this picture. This fence kept the, I think John Zerlo owns the building on the corner, but it was the school. So that separated his side lawn from
When was the house built, Jim, do you know?
1860.
They moved to town in 1869.
But it was built in 1860, and I haven't determined yet who had it from 60 to 69, but here's a view of the house.
Where would the little house be that you're talking about?
What you see right
Not in the
there.
picture, it's on the other
It's
side.
just, you have to see it just
Oh,
past.
right back there, huh?
Yeah. And the Wests bought the house after, and Florence and her sister and her mother had taken care of, been good friends with his sister Elizabeth, Captain Turner's sister, and they had taken care of him in his old age. And then they moved into the house, and they didn't throw much of anything out, which was good. But they closed in, this porch is closed in right now, right, Jim?
Yes.
And then the original shutters are stored in the shed, he tells me.
Yep.
And they put a
kidding.
ramp
We will
here.
use them again.
Oh,
See, he's not renovating, he's restoring.
restoring is great. Isn't
This
it
is great.
wonderful? I love it.
And, what does it say? Oh, the lumber market that Rouses Point was in the 1870s. And John R. Booth, he was the Canadian lumber prince. And he came down from Ottawa and established the many railroads, but the railroad spur that ran along the lake from State Street to, I'm thinking, almost Champlain Street. And if you look at the old steamboat hotel pictures you see in that drawing, the train, imagine it, the ties that went in. But he built piers for his lumber, and the boats would come in and pick up the lumber, and his object was the New England market. And it was going over there. And this was, so in 68 or so, he acquired from the railroad what was called the Green. Lake frontage from State Dock, right along. For $5,000, he and his partners, I'm going to think of who they were now, David White, John Myers, the original, the father of F.W. Myers, and Albert Chapman, who built the Chapman block.
Aha.
And up they went for $5,000. They got 3 1/12 acres.
Who would ever figure it out? Isn't that?
Neat. And then Albert Chapman died in 72. John Myers died later in 68. That left David White and Mr. Booth. And somehow or other, Mr. Booth bought out the heirs and his partner through quitclaim deeds. Okay? Which Jim has explained to me is a fast way to do if you want to do business quickly, you use a quitclaim. And he's the one they paid the $175 for this piece of land. Well, in 81, Booth brought his work to Burlington. Mr. Turner took over and ran the lumber business for many years, opened a grocery store, bought and sold property. He dug and delved in many, many things. And he died in 95. His son Joseph took over. His business was so intricate. But the lumber thing is what gets to me, because in one of these articles, the person went on to say, talk about the quitclaim deeds. And he or she said that those quitclaim deeds were in the possession of Miss Elizabeth Turner. And I was sitting right in there, and I said, oh no, they're not. Guess who had the quitclaim deeds?
Come on.
Yeah.
It was all left there.
It was all there. And when we went through the boxes, I was so into other things, I had said, we'll look at these deeds later. Well, later came.
Yeah, later always has a habit of coming, doesn't it?
Here they are.
All this stuff was upstairs.
All of it.
You must have freaked out.
A lot of it, I didn't know what it was. I just knew that it was
Those are the quitclaim deeds.
to be kept.
Oh, did you
for
see
sure.
Rufus Heaton? Yes. Rufus Heaton had sold on quick claim, and Rufus Heaton is the one that sold the store to my grandfather on State Street, my great-grandfather.
Now, these were on shelves upstairs. You have to explain this to me. Most people would know what's in a house when they buy it.
There were a lot of nice old grocery store type boxes, you know, and I kept those too, actually, because
Well, of
they're
course you did. Just boxes in a room?
boxes with brands on them and stuff. And you know, when you move into a house like that and you don't know who the people were, it's mysterious and you don't delve into it. But the way that it all
You
came
don't
together,
delve into it, baby.
the way
He
that
does
it, the
now.
way that it
I
came
would be in
together,
those boxes so fast.
But he didn't throw them out.
No,
No,
of
kept
course
them.
you don't throw them out.
digested a little at a time.
Oh, yeah.
And then I came along with that picture, and so I thought to myself, I wonder if it would be unfair to ask Jim if I could go through these quick claim deeds, definitely copy them, and analyze all this exchange of property down the road to the best of my expertise. And I'll ask somebody if I have to. And I went through the personal things in there, tax receipts, made copies, put everything I'd finished in envelopes for Jim, receipt of tax collector. When they buried Mrs. Turner, I even have that in there, in 1915, the total cost for the hearse, everything, A to Z, $85. And they were not stingy.
Even buy the pillow for $85.
Exactly. So then I got to the deeds, and so I've put them in chronological order. It seems like the only way for me to approach them. And I was going really strong. The first deed, he acquired a piece of property on Lake Street, 35, I think, feet wide, from sisters who had moved to Vermont. And he had a 3-year contract. He would pay them, he gave them so much up front, and he would finish paying them in 3 years. That was the agreement. The second deed I picked up, he has sold on a 2-year agreement to Mr. E.E. Bullis. This is like 18, I forgot now what it is, 80-something. A 35-foot frontage lot on Lake Street. So I thought, what can you do with 35 feet on Lake Street, and where on Lake Street, and how do I find out where it is on Lake Street? And I was getting pretty fed up about this. So, but the specifications, so that 2-year contract would be valid, not null and void, were strict. Mr. Bullis was to begin building immediately of a strong stone foundation, a wood frame structure to be built to the south end of the lot, within a foot of the party. And party had a little sort of ramshackle post office at the time, which was moved to Rose Avenue, and that's another whole story. Party later put up a building which barely has a foot between. So we came along, and he had to leave 7 feet on the other side. So we're talking roughly 27 feet. I think I had that figured 8 off of the 35, 27 or 8, 27, right? So now the building just got smaller. So he had to leave 7 feet on the north side for access to the lake. Now comes the quitclaim deeds. Because what are they quitclaim to? Lake property. And I thought, this man wanted it all. But he can't even get a horse and buggy down there in 7 feet. What I didn't realize till looking at it later, he owned the store next door. And he had his 7 feet or so, and he got this in there, and there was the access to the lake. He could build 75 feet deep, by the way. And I thought I wouldn't want a contract like that. So I thought of the name Bullis, and I thought, I know Mr. Bullis had a hardware store. Where did it? My grandfather, my great-grandfather, had built a 5-room house to the back of the homestead for privacy. He went out there and read, and I don't know. And of course, young teenagers, what's in there? They'd come and sweep every year, and lace curtains moved, and so on. So Joan won't mind, because we've talked about it. Joan Fozier, Bushy now. We had nothing to do. We were about 13 years old, and we thought, a skeleton key opens about anything. And there were like 5 doors.
Of course it does. Yeah.
So we went to Mr. Bullis and bought a skeleton key for 10 cents. And we spent many a rainy afternoon browsing in the. It burned eventually. And so much was. I'd have taken the pictures out of there if I'd known it was going to burn.
Oh.
I did not. And so I went back looking again, and I realized Mr. Bullis is where Heads Up is now. Because when I went in to get my hair cut, my granddaughter is there. I asked Vicki, how wide is your shop? And she looked at me like, that's a silly. But afterwards, she got her tape measure out when she was finished, and she said, 10 feet. You add the other side. You add the petition. I had it. It was 103 Lake Street. So
Isn't that beautiful?
then my mother got
You're
sick.
a pretty good investigator,
Well,
you know?
Mom got sick, and I was the next 5 or 6 weeks. I've never had a chance to get back to the deeds, but I will. I will get back.
This is such a charming story. It must make you feel really terrific to get the
absolutely.
history of your house. I write ghost stories, so I can, almost feel the spirit of this great old guy as you're describing what you found upstairs. Don't be surprised if you hear footsteps up
well,
there some night.
It's usually the cat, but
Uh-oh.
it makes me wonder. I never feel alone.
Well, that's a good thing, and there's so many great stories from this end of the
Here he is.
county. That's him later on
Yes.
in life.
After retirement.
Well, you can see that he still had that thin.
And we
almost
feel from the
face.
finish, on the building, that he was back at the academy for something annual, and he has that pensive look off. But
And
we were,
found that picture with a photograph that was definitely from the academy, probably one of his colleagues in dress uniform, and I found the pictures together. And it was a real pleasure when I went over to the Ross room one night to work with Mrs. Racine, and I had the picture ready, and I said, the original actually, and I said, I want to reintroduce you to an old friend.
he did.
You know,
And I cried.
Aren't these golden moments? These
Absolutely.
are priceless for people who enjoy history, and this is delicious for
We
the.
have his engineering, his mathematical workbooks, what an engineer. And while I was looking for the picture, a man walked in to the Ross room, and we almost acted like Jim was intent on me finding this gift. And we were interrupted, and the man was Bill Champagne. I'd met him 3 weeks before in the Ross room, and he married a laundry. Well, it was all home day. So Bill came in, and I thought, oh yeah, well, this is Bill Champagne, and this is Jim Drew, and I just kept on going. And for some reason, I turned to Bill, who was like 75 or 6, and said, oh, did you ever hear of Captain John Turner? He said, yes. Everything stopped. And I said, you knew him? Yes. Well, he said, when I heard that he had served in the North Atlantic like I had,
yeah.
he said, I made it my business to go visit him. He said, many is the afternoon I sat on his porch, and we talked. Well, there's a 16 by 16 cement slab in the yard. And I've just picked up the rumor on it. He was going to build a tower or a lighthouse to a height where he could go up and see the lake, which this man who loved the water would want to do. And there we were at like 10 o'clock one night, Jim and I, on a very cold night, pondering that 16 by 16 cement slab. Jim claims it wouldn't be something as heavy because the cement is of such a gauge. I'm not sure about what's up, and I don't understand all of that. But here's there's the uniform. There's the hat that was there.
Look at
That's the epaulets, that's it.
Oh, isn't that beautiful? And that uniform, he was buried in that uniform?
Yes.
Oh, isn't that neat? What have you got?
This is a souvenir of Captain Turner's that I found upstairs at home, and he served in the Arctic Circle. And they must have had a reunion or something. It's a book of songs, and they're comical verses, and there's like the title, but it was based on a popular song, and that'll be written in parentheses below the title. And I wish I knew some of those. Like the first one, I think, was sung to the tune of the Bowery. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, I know
the
the
Bowery. The Bowery. Of course, we know the Bowery.
And they do such things.
There was a Bowery, and I used to spend a lot of my young college years talking to people who bums from the Bowery. My father introduced me to some of these people that were very rich Wall Street magnates who lost everything during those days. Oh, aren't these great? And this was just part of the whole
It's a pretty eclectic collection. I have over there
Beulah
some.
Land.
I don't know that one either. Do you know?
What's it?
Beulah Land. I kind of do, but I can't remember a melody connected with
I
it.
need an old music expert.
Yeah. Mandalay.
He left.
You know that one.
Mandalay.
Yeah, where the flying fishes play. Yeah, we know that. The dawn comes up like thunder.
We have his reading list for this marvelous room full of
I
books.
think the reading list is my favorite thing.
I do too.
Oh, these are every one of these things is a treasure.
You know, I was
Okay,
A
now you've done it.
yeah.
you just crossed the
my
line.
heart went putt-putt when I saw these. I said,
Oh, where's Southwick when we need
how
him?
come I don't have a garage with this car
This
in
is
it,
my
you know?
dream car right here. I came within 1 inch of having a car just like this in 1955.
Well, this tells you why his interest in cars. He wanted to go for a ride in that Henry J. You know, this quiet,
Yeah.
bookish man wanted to see what that was all about.
And I remember from my boyhood interest in cars, this Cord, and they said that it was one of the most technologically advanced cars of its day. It was the first car with pop-out headlights. It was a supercharged engine, and I forget all the other innovations.
It was a
But you
front
see,
wheel
he was the
chain
engineer.
drive. What else do you want to know about it?
Yeah?
Beautiful V8 engine. It was way ahead of its time. It had what is known as the coffin hood.
Oh,
See,
yes.
the coffin hood and grill. Each side of the windshield cranked out separately. The headlights, as you can see, are smooth on the front fenders, and they each cranked out with a little crank. They weren't electronic in those days, but the design was tremendously advanced. And if you had a whole Cord now, you would be able to retire and sit cross-legged on the floor in this office and study anything you wanted to do without ever shoveling snow again. And in the 1950s and 60s, in the Cord, in the Auburn, Indiana, they were still making and selling
That's right.
parts for the Cords from the 1930s.
There's a big museum there. Yeah, I want to go there
It's a
someday.
wonderful, wonderful automobile, and you just happened to come across it. Does this mean that he probably had one?
No, he never had a car in my memory, but I think it probably was his dream car. But he walked. He didn't go far, and when he traveled, he went on the train. When he went back to New York and places like that, he
So if it
went on the
wasn't for
train.
that, if it wasn't for this pedestrian village that we used to have, there could have been a Cord in my deal.
There could have been a Cord in your garage.
Have you looked out there lately?
I've been looking for the garage. There's not even a garage.
Oh, okay.
This is his brother. His brother died in 28, which is why he retired in 30 to come home and be with Elizabeth. But I found this in, was a Business Connection publication? And I wondered if this was the ad that got Jim and Kim to look at the house. Own a piece of history in the center of Rouses Point. Now, they realized the history of the house. And you get a better look at the small one next door. And it's a large lot, all told. So, and I love this view of it from the west. And so I kept that, and I gave Jim a copy and slipped it in here because of
That's
the
wonderful. Why not?
appreciation
It's
of
part
history.
of it, isn't it?
It's
Nice
part of it.
surprise for us.
Yes. So you're going to build up. And then, of course, I bring everything up to date, and this is Joshua
Oh,
and
gosh.
Jack Drew.
That's what it's all about, isn't
That's
it,
what
Jim?
it's all
That's where the
about.
people live.
Oh, that's
And this is
beautiful.
more of State Street, but we had a historical meeting up here, all impromptu and very fast. And I had looked at this picture again and again, and we've discussed it. And I know some of the people, but I don't know where. And we have tried and tried. And if anyone out there knows where,
Would it be
these
better
men
if I
are-
held it up, maybe? What would you guess? Have got any guesses?
First looking at it, I thought Holland, but it's not right. The stone walls, the depth of the windows, and someone decorative put the flowers on. This is Earl Christie right here. I think this is Harold Duffy, Ken Wiley. And peeking out down here is Harry Yell, Phil Strack, Morris Bayshore, Bick Carrier, Albert Carrier. And then I come to these people that I've seen, but I don't know. But anyway, that was laying on my desk that night. And I walked by and looked down and said, "Oh, my Lord, Jim, take a look." The maroon cardigan sweater, the bow tie, Captain Turner.
Is it really?
Yes, it's Captain John Turner.
Oh, up on the left-hand side. And the chef is over there on the side. It's
I'm pretty
obviously
sure
a
that's Harold
public.
Taylor.
It's a public room, right? Wouldn't you guess? And there's a brick wall
Yes.
on the back.
And the windows look thick. I've thought of the upstairs rooms at the Chapman Block. There was a Brusso block that they had meetings in on Pratt Street, but that was wood. I cannot peg where.
You don't even know what the occasion was.
No,
And either the flags are held or hung wrong, or this picture
Or
could be
it's
reversed.
backwards, and I'm
could
guessing.
be.
Every time I see that, I'm just guessing, and you always notice it too.
The
But
flags
I'm
are
guessing that
backwards.
that the flags are reversed. Interesting, though.
It is, where the things that fall into place. And there, I was bemoaning the fact that I would never lay eyes on this man again, and he'd been sitting on my desk the whole time. But then my daughter bought me the magnifying lamp.
Oh, you got one of those?
Yes.
Oh, yes, we've seen
And
those.
if the writing is in pencil, it saves my life. I can do it now.
Yeah,
But this is the good fortune beyond my imagination to come into this material, really.
so what are your plans for the house? Are you just going to gnaw away at it a little bit at
It's
a time?
going to be our family home. Mrs. Racine informed me that the Turners were there as one nuclear family with the children surviving for 90 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, isn't that great? See what you got ahead of you? Because I know you plan to be around for at least 90 years.
Why not?
Well, what led me to a brother? No, I was not led to a brother. I decided I should go up to Maple Hill and pay my respects. I hadn't said anything to Captain Turner since
Oh, my
1959.
goodness. You're gonna bring them back to your house.
So I
yeah.
knew where the Turner lot was, and I stopped. And I discovered a brother, Joseph, a sister, Elizabeth, a brother, Robert, who died in toddler, 1 or 2 years old, and twins, Harriet and Harry, who lived 12 and 13 days. So John was born in 72. Robert was born in 74. So this 2-year-old, and you didn't go to the hospital then. This trauma was lived out in that
Right
family
there.
home.
Of course.
And then the twins were born in 77. And by that time, John was 5 years old. And I'm totally focused on John. The trauma John had seen and lived through, the sadness he saw his parents experience, I think affected the man, with his sensitivity and his understanding. And he never married and never had a family. In fact, that's why the Turner family died out. And this is what really I could not find an obituary for John.
No.
No, went into the records, it wasn't
You
in
know
there.
the exact date, though.
Well, I didn't, but I do now.
Ah.
And I said to Jim, it's not fair, because 4 weeks later, I found a funeral announcement. And I said to Jim, it's not fair, I've got to remediate this. So we decided together we would write the forgotten obituary.
Come on.
Oh, yeah. No,
Don't you love it? I love
yes.
it.
But now we have so much material, we can do a booklet.
Yeah.
So we're going to do, but there was no one to write his obituary. And if you read his brother Joseph's, his sister Elizabeth died in 49. John wrote that obituary. And those are where I've gotten most of the information on the Turner family. But there was one missing, you see. And in the Ross room, I had been going through the John Ross pictures, and most of them are glass plates that Frank Party photographed from his home and some on. And he would get Dolly, and it would say D-O-L-L-Y Party, and D-O-L-L-Y Party. And I said to Jim, if she walked down the street, I'd say, hi, Mrs. Party. I would know her. I knew her wallpaper, her living room, the whole thing. I turned a picture over, and it said Dolly Turner Party. So back I went, and sure enough, she was survived by her brother John. I think that was 1933, August of 33. And then I think Orion, I can't remember his first name, Arnold Ryan, would write home from Lowell, Massachusetts. He grew up here in the 80s and 90s and so on. And going through the attic, he found an autograph book. And he said he proceeded from his house where the church was, Church Street, down the street where his school was, State Street, and he had J.F.H. McDonough, Marguerite McDonough of F.W. Myers, Aunt Min and Uncle Frank McDonough, the Cooper House. Their mother ran a little private school there. And he came on down, and he had Joseph and Elizabeth Turner, and he had Dolly, D-O-L-L-I-E.
No kidding.
Not Y. So ever since then, whenever I copy or do anything involving her, I spell it I-E. So we have that all together. And she lived at 6 Pearl Street, and I've researched that house. And we had a Christmas party there this year. I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to walk back in history and walk through Dolly Turner Party's
You
house.
do. When you study it, you do walk back through history.
Yes.
You actually do. And I can tell just by the way you're
A house
giving.
has an aura or some sort. I don't know what it is, but
You want to talk off
feel
camera to
privileged.
me about that?
That's right.
Writing the ghost stories that I write in my house and other houses, you can certainly feel the spirit out of it if you don't believe anymore.
well, I have
There are
found,
memories.
Or
And if
learned.
these walls could talk, remember?
I don't know if all historians do this, but I go my way because it works and I'm comfortable.
Well, that's what we all have to.
So I look for the old-fashioned obituaries, and I'm pretty irate when they've narrowed down. It was a whole life story. I would get the parents, the sisters, the brothers, the occupations, and so on. And now I've discovered, because I was curious about somebody's will. Oh, J.B. Stearns, the lawyer, had left money to the library, $500, if they would agree to keep his diaries and selected papers stored for 15 years, which brought us to 1958, and then make them available for research. And the papers have disappeared. We don't know where they are. So I went down to get J.B. Stearns' will. I got Frank Party's will, John Turner's, and then you bring it together. Then you bring it all together with these wills, and you don't want to go to sleep at night, Gordy, because there's something more to do, you know?
Maybe when you do go to sleep, things will.
Well, you wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, regenerate, and start all over again. 10 to 5, right back on the track.
These people don't come into your dreams at all?
I don't think so, no. I can't say that they have.
We'll see what happens in the future.
So-
What have you got here that we ought to look at?
These are the cutters. Tell them that, Jim, the revenue
These
cutters.
apparently are the types of Coast Guard cutters which Captain Turner served on. I
Were
haven't-
these in the building?
They were at home. Yes, they were.
Not only were the types were
This
probably
one has
the actual.
ice around it, so that could be. They
Well,
could
He
be.
was in the. You said that he was at the Arctic Circle, right?
Yeah, and we have. I'm not sure of the terms, but I think he crossed services somehow, and he served in the Navy in the period of World War One, and he was on. He was part of this fleet which mineswept the North Atlantic.
Wow,
Yeah, for the war effort.
that's quite a
It's pretty important
quite a
service.
photograph. All these are different. Every one of these boats are different.
Yep, the lady from the Coast Guard Academy. The papers described all these boats by their
Oh, really?
code
Oh,
numbers.
so you have the background of the boats
Yes,
too?
and descriptions of them, their type, their specifications, things like that.
Have you scanned all these pictures
No.
to give to them? No. So they're yours and yours alone
No,
right
I don't
now,
feel that
huh?
way. I feel that we should share this stuff as responsibly any way we can.
I can't believe this stuff. And all these things were in boxes.
Yeah.
Upstairs in your house, all in one room or in different rooms or?
Most everything was in the well, we call it a master bedroom that was closest to the street. That was probably his parents' room. It's in the oldest section of the house. I always figured his parents started there. And it was right upstairs from the front door, and to the point where we had to renovate it. It had very impressive decorations with the wallpaper and the old-fashioned cast iron hooks on the wall and in the closet. It's the only room with a closet, so that pretty
So
much
it
tells me
hadn't
it
been
was the
touched in how
important
long?
bedroom.
Do you think? Would you guess?
Well, as we were told, it was 40 years that they hadn't lived upstairs.
And they may not have renovated it when they did live upstairs, so it may have been a lot longer than that. That
Certainly
wallpaper
could be.
may have dated back.
Yep. We saved samples of it, of course.
Did you really?
Yeah.
There are bills in there when the older brother came home from out west after the father died, or the mother died. Joseph came home to be with Elizabeth. And he had it electrified. We know how many
That's right. That whole
plates
order,
and boxes
that
and
whole
wire, and that
contract.
whole thing is there.
Yeah.
When he did that. So he made
That's an improvement.
renovations in some way.
And Captain Turner, of course, again, the engineer. I've taken walls apart and found where he had apparently worked on the plaster in that section, and he would record it. He would scratch his initials into
Oh, no
wet
kidding.
plaster. So
You found them?
Yeah, I tried to lift that
I love it.
with a pencil, and I was working on a window upstairs, and he noted that it was a new 2-light window and the date, So he was busy around the house. I could use his help now.
Well, maybe you're getting it whether you like it or not. You never
Well,
know.
I
What else
think-
you got here?
That was
This-
a reading list. This was pretty exciting. There was a yard sale before we moved in, and I don't know if this list was made then, but it gives me the impression that it's books that were in the house. And Mrs. Racine speaks of the study where she picked them up for that famous ride. And some of the books remained, but a lot of them I never saw. But it's a varied list.
Oh, it's
He
You have a copy
read a lot
the
of different
Steinbeck book.
things.
So he did read, he read,
Yeah.
but he favored Sir Walter Scott. Sir Walter
And,
Scott he did.
But he was trying to keep up. He had a first edition Hemingway, For Whom the Bell Tolls. I don't know if he was interested in that because of the service and the war interests, or it's interesting stuff.
It's a very impressive reading list. Obviously, most large houses had libraries at the time.
Stationery? Oh, good Lord.
There's the stationery.
Why don't you take a piece of that, Mrs. Racine?
John B.
I'll
Turner,
put it over there.
59 State Street, Rouses Point, New York.
in
There
with
you go.
Here's a yearbook titled Sweeping
Oh,
the
you
North
said-
Sea Mine
And you
Barrage.
said that's what he did, right?
Yep. It tells the whole story of their mission, the devices they used, and the area they served, and
That was pretty rough duty back in those days, and it still is. That's great. Any boxes that you haven't been through yet?
no, I've tried to organize things. I'll take a given box, and like I have one with a red top, and I said, well, Cornell is big red. I'll put all his
Well,
Cornell
there you
things
go.
in there.
That's good.
And one with a navy blue top. I put all his Coast Guard artifacts in there. And then his personal reading of retirement, I presume I put it in there. Look at these dogs. That's funny. A lot of poetry. I'm always struck by how much writing the people from those days did. There was a lot of things described in verse. Photograph technology is very impressive. You ever think about that? Of course, someone taking a shot from the bridge of the Eider at a drifting mine.
Hmm.
Missed.
That's how they got them? They shot at the mines? Goodness.
That's great stuff.
Oh, they've had time to fish too. That's very good stuff.
There, got some cod.
That's
Wow.
not a catch either.
Uh-huh.
Well, Jim despaired of how are we going to handle his retirement. We have his professional life. We have his youth here, and I found stories here and there where he'd tag along with his brother 4 years older, as a boy would do. And they would go out on Point of Fur, the older boys, and John tag along. And they would lay on their backs and stargaze and do whatever, and smoke corn cob pipes. That was the big no-no.
Sure.
And one time a teacher came along, Mr. Someone, and we're in trouble now. He proceeded to light his corncob pipe, lay on his back on the ground, and stargaze with them. I thought, how smart of him to do that. One of John's experiences. And then another time they took a boat, went to Isle of Mott. The lake will change in a heartbeat. They got beached somewhere, and they were like 2 or 3 days going. They got blown into Canada, and they came back. They had adventures. John was not quite as stoic as you might think he was. He was something else. So we couldn't get his retirement. What happened from 1930 to 1959? Well, this Mr. Champagne, who said he sat and talked with him on the porch, said, and I have extensive notes on our conversations at home in Cohoes.
Oh, come on.
We're going to find out about the cement
Oh, you don't
16
have
by
them yet?
16. No, we're going to get
Oh, come
a
on.
cement pad. We're going to find out about that cement pad if it's the last thing I
He's
do.
copying the notes for you?
He will send us copies of the notes, yes.
Don't let that get away.
So it's a good
Oh,
thing we didn't
wow.
give up because it walked right in the door. It came right in.
That's the way the best stuff is, when it walks right in the door. That's so absolutely wonderful.
Well, the picture in there that I did of Captain Turner, I determined to put it with the tea set. Because I feel pictures and objects go, Gordy, I can't let it go out of the office.
Oh.
He's there with me all, whatever hours I spend here, and he's friendly. And Abe has hung in all of my social studies classrooms, my daughter's social studies classrooms, and she had to dig that out of her attic. So it got to be user-friendly because the teachers said that when you walked across the back of the room, Abe's eyes gently followed you. And so I have John there.
Very, very interesting that Abraham Lincoln should be in your classroom, because he and George Washington are the two presidents that I remember from the 1- and 2-room schoolhouses of my youth. As a matter of fact, I'm in the middle of writing what probably will be a column that'll run right around President's Day, which we're recording this on the 10th day of February 2005. So
Well, you
it'll be
asked
here
me
soon
earlier
enough.
about my interest in history, and I told you, but the first cognitive memory that I have that I know had to do with history was at the Dodge Memorial Library. And I was probably 7 years old. And there was this very small, anything but colorful book. And the illustrations were in dull tone. They weren't this brilliant things, you know, that he would do, but it was Mr. Lincoln. And it was his life, and there was a picture of him trying to read by firelight and writing with a piece of wood on a wooden shovel. And I thought, if he could teach himself to read, if he could teach himself law, if this man could do this. So I took that book out over and over and over again. And as an elderly person now, I hope I brought it back the last time, Calvin, because I can't remember. I don't know if I did or didn't, but if I ever see it in a box at an auction, I'll know it. And I'll get that box, do or die.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, yes.
That's wonderful, those memories.
And that
how
began
you key on.
my dance with Mr. Lincoln.
That's amazing. And, you know, those of us who were brought up learning or memorizing at least part or all of the Gettysburg Address and have visited that site so many times and try to sense what it was like, but few of us are aware that he had a very high, squeaky voice.
So did Thomas Jefferson, and I really
so did
respect
Thomas
Mr. Jefferson.
But Lincoln didn't have a big, deep voice that you might expect from this big, strong log splitter. But he was a pretty good debater, wasn't he? Huh?
I think he was a good thinker.
Yeah,
He philosophized a great deal like Jim does, and he put it in simple, direct words that hit you, and you knew the meaning. Two things I did bother to memorize in my lifetime were the preamble to the Constitution and the Gettysburg Address. And sometimes when when I used to go on my exercise bike, I would recite the Gettysburg Address to myself because I'd get impatient doing nothing on this bike. I'd get mentally.
You know, you talked about poetry, and just to pursue that subject, when we were kids, we learned poetry in school. We learned songs, some of the classic American songs in school.
And they love them still today.
And poetry stays with you, you know.
Mm-hmm. Boy, it makes me think, these autograph books, poetry, they didn't just write good luck for tomorrow. They wrote little poems. And the one over there belonged to Lottie somebody, and it's roughly 1880. These Twice Told Tales, it's 1940, and they're tales that have a message, kind of, you know, and you laugh. Little boy's patting the cat near the fireplace. The mother says, "Oh, isn't it wonderful? He's so kind to the cat. Things are going well." And the cat starts to purr. The cat says, "Yes, the things are going well." And suddenly the little boy grabs the cat by the tail and flings it across the room, and Mom said, "Oh, you shouldn't have done that." And he said, "Mom, I had to save the cat. He was starting to boil." Those are the kinds of tales in there.
Oh, yeah, beautiful.
This is scripture. Let me see. This one down here would be, let's see, 82. And that would belong to a Mary. And I think her last name was Moore. Related to lads, I don't know if the Rouses Point lads or the Shazy lads, but it's one extended family. And this one here is a Lizzie, 1883. And I'm trying to think if I can bring back. Oh, Lizzie is your name. Happy is your life. Lucky is the man who gets you for a wife. Your friend Margaret, March 14th, 1883.
Isn't it?
Speaking of verse, and
They all had those verses.
they
in
did,
every
but they
page.
made them up, and there's one page of verse after another in that one, and they're so fragile.
Well, you got some neat stuff crammed in.
Well, down here is, of course, Rufus King, some copy of his books, and I did have the privilege of knowing Mr. King. I knew his mother
Did you really?
as a little
Isn't that
girl.
great?
Oh, yes. And these two here, thanks to the Barney grandchildren, for Hank Van Acker, Charles Barney, and Sylva Mary, and George Marnes, the grandfather, Charles J. Barney, worked here in this building for 15 years. And he had some old ledgers that were in the building. And he kept more a log than a diary. And they let me have it. Come here now.
I'm following you. All right, we, time flies when you're having fun, right, lady?
Yes.
And our time is almost up, but we want to look at a couple of more things, and then we demand that you invite us back another time.
That won't be
so
hard
much
to do.
talk about. What have you got here?
I transcribed his diaries because the paper's so fragile. And I did 2 copies, one for the brass room, one here. And he had the dates. He sometimes would skip. He would say how many toes came down, when they put the rafts out. Let's just take something. Snowed and drifted all day until evening. Men put to job, had to quit work at 11. And he's going on. He
I
even,
love this one. King George buried.
Yes.
January
And he would do
28,
that,
1936. There's, might as well get a little international history in there, right?
Boris Hutman is executed. He was into the Lindbergh
Oh, sure. Who wasn't?
thing, and he was, and then somehow, oh, the traumatic. He would say, Mrs. Barney is in the hospital. He followed the sports. He supported his children in sports very, very much. Where's the end?
Yeah, automatic chlorinator out of order, using the old one.
Exactly. Charles Barney off work, sickness, tremendous headaches. And somebody entered, Charles Barney died at 7:25, Plattsburgh kept right up to, and then somebody kept records, you can just go down. And it's, he was very proud, there he is, Mr. Barney, which I think he should be in the front. Yes, he's in the front.
There he is, same photograph, and I think I've seen that picture before somewhere.
Very
I don't
tall
know
man,
where.
extremely tall.
2 diaries of Charles Barney with the permission of his grandchildren, huh?
Mhm. And this was his youngest son, George Barney. This is a postcard, it says there. And here he's holding a basketball, just holding it in each hand.
Isn't that great?
Mm-hmm.
I always admired basketball players that had long fingers. Mine are fat and not long.
Yeah. And then just the Barney family and so on. But I wanted to get to this one. As a historian, I sometimes don't really know what's expected of me. But I did find a
Well, you
mistake.
just do what comes naturally.
I was scrapbooking and I found a mistake. And I didn't know what to do. Did I look the other way and let it go? And I said, no. So I corrected it on the paper. And I talked to Addie about it. And she said, it's your duty, because if someone goes looking for information, they'll go in the wrong way. Well, a branch of the Laundry family, who spell their name differently, went Laundry. And where Sandy opened her bakery at 92 Lake Street was Laundry, but it was rented out. And there was a meat market downstairs. Mr. Saborin had a meat market there. Well, in this article, they put the other Laundry family from 92 Lake Street into 82. So now I want to move them back to 92 Lake, which is right here, this house,
Well, there you go.
where they lived for about as many years as the Turners did. And the article said that in that building, Elijah Laundry had cut all cuts of meat in the meat market down there. Well, there was a meat market down here, okay? And the laundry who cut meat down there was Joseph. There was a store in this front room. There was a den, a dining room, and a kitchen in the back, a full-length living room that went with the porch. And Harold Miro told me that if you went up the side stairs and went up to the living room, Nellie Laundry would teach you piano lessons there, and my daughter has the piano.
Your daughter's got the piano?
Yes, and Elijah was my grandfather's first cousin. But anyway, Joseph cut the meat here in the Laundry butcher shop, and he did it with great finesse, and he was very well respected, full page obituary, whatever. He was also an accountant, Albany Business College. He was a paralegal who worked with and for J.B. Stearns. And you cut meat because your father has died, and this is what you do. You're the oldest brother.
Isn't that amazing?
Right. Elijah, on the other hand, might sit in the store because he loved to tear off pieces of the brown paper and do his ciphering or make notes. And Elijah was an MD. And it's a love story because he was engaged. She died, a short illness. And he must have been very deep because nothing he knew could save her. So he closed his black bag and never practiced again.
Wow.
Okay?
That's dedication, huh?
So he had to look around. I don't know what this is. His brother was a Monsignor Laundry, stationed in Dannemora. Well, anyway, Elijah retooled. He had an adult life to live, and he decided, apparently, to get a government job. So I have the original copy at home. Fund a guarantee bond, the Washington Civil Service School. Now, the guarantee was, if you passed all the tests, that they would guarantee you would get a government job. And if you didn't, they would refund your fee. Okay.
Don't find many schools like that anymore,
And there was
do
a
ya?
paper with this, a small paper he'd written on, that he projected what he wanted for his future. And one of the projections was to retirement at 70 years old. And he retired at 70 years old, Deputy Collector of Customs. He got the government job,
See
and
that?
his dream came to fruition. He just did it.
I
Never
love
married.
it.
Here's Elijah from a small photograph that Bob Van found at the dump.
He was good at that, wasn't he?
And there's the store, and it's closed then because Joe closed in January of 42 when rationing came in. And he said that was just too much, and he would open his meat market when the foolishness was over.
Isn't that beautiful?
And he died in his sleep the following month. So this is after that. This is, I'd say probably 45 or 6. But Jim could see, I can't tell, but he said there's Rinso and Ivory Flakes.
I can see the ivory flakes.
He never took the stuff off the shelves. And what was the comment you
Rinso
told about
white.
soap and war?
Rinso white, remember? What?
My friend who was born in Germany, 1939, and had to grow up in the midst of that horrible environment, he told me when I worked for him for several years, I don't know why, I don't remember what brought it up, but he said soap is more valuable than gold when times are hard, in deplorable situations.
Well, listen, we've just recently been interviewing some people who went through the Holocaust and were not willing residents of Auschwitz and various other concentration camps, and having any kind of a bath, hot or cold, was a commodity, a luxury in those days. So I can understand what they say about soap.
Well, these came to me. My daughter-in-law can find a needle in a haystack, and as I've repeated many times, my son Brandon goes to get the haystack and brings home the needle, brings home the whole haystack.
Sure.
So they collect everything.
Makes sense.
But when he emptied my father's place, which my father bought Elijah's after Elijah died, I said, don't, he said, Mom, there's just boxes of paper. And I said, Brandon,
Paper.
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 So they gave me, I think, 5 letters written in the summer of 1904. The daughter Nellie, who taught at the school here, would work in the summer because she made $320 some odd dollars or $69 a year. No wonder she taught music lessons and worked for the summer. So she went to the Thousand Islands, the Westminster Hotel. And I was
Alex
interested.
Bay. See how it's all hooked up? I used to live there and work
Yes,
there.
there you go. And I was interested in her because Dad would always say she's the only other teacher in the Laundry family, Donna. And as a little boy, Brandon had visited there, and he'd come home with a fistful of cardboard cutout letters, and they were beautiful script, not block. And I made a mistake. He was so glad to give them to me, and I counted, and I said, but Brandon, there aren't 26. We don't have them all. But Mom, I looked everywhere. We had 26. If you take the bottom off the E, you have F. If you take the legs off, you have L. If you turn the W, you had M. We had all 26 letters, but they were very compact. But she writes home, and I never got, and oh, I have found her wedding picture. I do have Nellie Laundry LaValle and her husband. And she worked almost till retirement, which she had to stop, and an aide substitute took her place in the end. But she writes home about, well, I don't know. I've written to you, but you don't write to me. This is a one-way street. I don't know if I should write to you at all.
Yeah.
First her father, then her parents, and then she says, laundry is too expensive there. So if her mother would make her 4, I shouldn't say jackets, vest or blouses, that she could save that and bring the laundry home when she's done. And don't worry about the size. Fit Lena. And I knew Lena Laundry, so then I knew the size of Nellie Laundry. And she just goes on, and she bought china there. And she must have been something to live with. She was feisty because she was coming home, and a Mrs. Edwards would stay overnight because it was too long to get to Plattsburgh.
See that?
Yep. And she said, Mother, you will see that the boys behave. You will see that they pick up. You will see that they're kind. She went on, and I thought, those brothers must have driven Nellie crazy.
Oh, goodness. We could go on all day long, but
101
wait.
years, though, Gordy. There you have
Look
it.
at this.
There's the Laundry Cash Bazaar, the next... who
19
bought from her Wooten. Then it was Wooten, and then it was Pearls.
Well, that's a good place to stop.
Yes, it is.
Don't forget, we're on that page. Put a sticky note right there. Donna Racine, thank you so much for having us here. James, somebody's gonna knock on your door one of these days. We're gonna investigate your house to see if there's see if the old captain, if you're here in the middle of the night, it's more than squirrels.
He would be a friendly
He would
spirit
be the
if he were
best.
there. He would
What?
be.
This has been a delightful occasion down
glad
here
I
today in
finally
the
met
middle
you,
of a
Gordy.
big snowstorm on February 10th, 2005, to come to the village offices and find these warm people inside to share a little bit of history. Every town, every person has a story, and we've just begun to scratch the surface here in Rouses Point.
Yes, you have.
So we'll do it again.
You're welcome to do it.
Thanks again. Thanks, James. Best to you, your wife, and your wonderful children. Thank our viewers for watching this program, and we welcome their suggestions anytime for wherever you'd like to have us go, whatever subject matter you'd like to have us deal with, and give us friendly advice. We always take friendly advice. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.